Hey, Jordan, welcome to the show. Is where you getting started. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Brian. I'm happy to be here. Well, um, like you know, my name's Jordan Sandberg. I was born and raised here in Utah. I lived my pretty much my entire life here in Utah, except for 2 years. I lived down in South America for 2 years in Colombia. I've got three boys and a dog named Pablo, so I'm really happy about that. I got my hands full.
Yeah.
I studied technical sales at Weber State. I did not all the way finish because I got married, had a kid, and bought a home within like a really, really short period of time, like ridiculously short. Got a sales job and really started learning like this is the way your life's gonna go. You're gonna be in sales and so you better jump into
Whether
it.
you like
So
it or not.
yeah, I did actually have the ambition to be in sales, but that definitely propelled it. When you buy a house, have a child, I mean, in such a short period of time, it was like, I got to get going. I can't be selling cell phones anymore. So I actually started out selling cell phones for a couple of years when I was going to college. And then I worked in the staffing industry for 13 years. And that's where I really got my business to business, outside sales experience, the
Wow.
crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And then for the past 5 years, I've been selling call center software and working from home. So it's been nice.
Cool. And how long did it take to kind of feel at home in sales? 13 years?
Am I at home? So sales is the greatest and the worst job in the world. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
When you're doing well and you're making money, I'm going to do this forever. Why would I ever want to go into management? Why would I ever want to be a rocket engineer? Why would I want to do anything?
Anything else? Yeah.
And then you have a bad year and you're looking at being a high school track coach, or you're trying to
You're
like get out of
right.
it and do
Yeah. I want to
anything
be a
else.
monk.
I'm gonna go into the seminary. I'm gonna go be a preacher. Like I will do anything but sales. For me, unfortunately, my personality is the way it is. So I think I kind of knew that I'm either going to do something sales related or something people related. I'm a little bit of a social butterfly. So
Yeah.
I think I was going that way. I never felt real uncomfortable with sales. What I didn't love is when I sold cell phones when I was going to college. I liked the experience of helping people and kind of making their world great, but it was very transactional, and it was you talk to somebody, they're going to make a decision within 10 or 15 minutes. They're going to leave the store. You're probably never going to see them
See him
again.
again. Right.
And so I wanted to actually work with like businesses and selling things that actually made a huge difference in their business and what they do, and that would be able to make more money. I
Yeah.
mean, there just wasn't that much money in retail sales. So
No, there isn't.
if that answers your question, I think it took me not too long, but I wanted to get into the business side real fast. I was
Yeah.
agitated that I wasn't.
And, when I talk to people that are in B2C or retail, and I see how hard they work, and I've done it. I did,
Oh,
you know,
oh.
and the income level, it, people don't believe it. They think you're trying to pull something over on them. And it's like, no,
Right.
no, just, search the internet. You can see the income ranges.
So I'll tell you kind of just to that point, that's exactly why I left. So I was working at a believe that, well, the names, it's been so long, it doesn't matter. I worked for AT&T. This was so many years ago, and I loved the job. It
Yeah.
was fantastic, but it was the stuff you talked about. And my older brother, BJ, who partially recommended me for this interview, he was working at this staffing company, and I thought, I'm working just as hard as you. And he was telling me what he was making, and I was like, bro, I'm dying. Like I'm working my tail off. I'm a pincushion. Like people are coming in here mad because their phone didn't work on, some mountaintop somewhere down in the
Right.
Tetons, and they come in and I've got to solve their issue. Like right now, like this is really difficult. So I knew I wanted to get into sales because I felt like the effort level was about the same, or
Yeah.
business to business, because the effort level was about the same, but the payoff was dramatically different.
It's,
And that's what drove me out.
yeah. And what does your sale look like today? Is it a large dollar
Pretty
amount?
strategic. Yeah, it's large dollar amount. I'm on our strategic enterprise team. So I only have you know, a very select, small amount of accounts and companies that I sell to, about 6.
Yeah.
And the deal ranges, I mean, they could be anywhere from $1 million to 15 million.
Wow.
They're really, really large, and
Yeah.
they take a long period of time. So then there's the opposite end of this spectrum, which is you go from making somebody happy, selling something to them in 10 minutes, to something that may take a year, 18 months, sometimes 2 years, because it's so strategic. There's like players all over the place, and it just takes a long, long, long time.
Yeah. A lot of people can't live with, I mean, because a lot of people like the transactional thing, the strategic thing. I mean, it's a roller coaster.
Oh, it is. It is. Because I mean, if let's just take last year, for example. It was a really good year for me, and it happened in the 4th quarter. And so I worked my tail off and took abuse all year, personally and professionally. It's like, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? It's going well. It's going well. And I've got all these things, and this is my plan, and this is how it's going. And, you know, we closed a significant amount of business in that 4th quarter. So this is just kind of a funny story, but I was at like 90% of my goal in, I don't know, October, November. And then I closed another huge amount the final day of the year. So as you can imagine, the amount of pressure that like goes into that, because the day before the last day of the year, you know, you're wondering, like, if this deal slips, goes to next year, I don't know what my comps plan is going to be like.
Oh, I can tell you what it will be.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it has to like, what do I have to do? So there's a lot of that goes into it, that in strategic long-term sales, some people just aren't built for it.
Right.
They need something to eat, you know, weekly.
Yeah.
And not just the money, but like the
success,
the mindset. Yeah, the success.
Feedback.
Like, hey, I closed something today. Cool. Let's work on that tomorrow. And me, it's like, hey, you might close something, you know, a few times a year.
And is that the nature for the whole company, or just your territory?
My team in particular,
Yeah.
it's more lumpy. I mean, we do everything we can to make it not lumpy, but my team, it is more that way. And then as you go down in terms of like company size and you know, the ranges that they're selling to, they get a little bit faster. But I sell call center software, so that stuff doesn't just like pop off the shelf like in one day. Like, oh, hey, you're a handsome, good looking guy, you seem like a good, reputable company, let's give you a shot. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Let's start Monday.
That's how staffing was, right? Staffing was the world I came from. In staffing was, you know, hey, that guy looks great, or gal, you know, that person looks great, they fit the bill, let's give them a try. If we don't like them halfway through the day, I can call you and tell them I don't need them anymore. So it was a shift to go from that to something so strategic that takes a long time to sell.
And so how many deals, like when you look at your pipeline, are you working on at once? Real deals?
Well, the best answer is as many as possible. Never enough, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, let's just take last year, for example. I worked on 5 significant size deals all year, and I closed 3 of them.
Okay.
And
wow.
and it was magical.
Yeah.
But this year I'm working on more, but they're maybe not as promising. It's a little bit more challenging. So anyways, if that gives you a little bit idea.
And what people, I mean, they hear about the win, but when you make 6, 12, 18-month investment on something that doesn't happen for whatever reason.
Oh yeah. Right.
They stick with what they do. They go out of
Exactly.
business. Who knows? Stuff you have control over, stuff you don't have control over.
It's so true. And that happens. I mean, it's happened. Again, this last year was great. The year before was great too, but it had a heartbreaker at the end of the year. And it was just like this. It was, hey, we've put all this time in. I've invested not only my time, but my teams and engineers, and all these people have come, and right down at the end, and it's like, it's not happening. Now what? It's like, I don't know. I'm going to jump off a bridge. I don't know.
Right. And have you come up with little signals, symptoms of when you know it's going to happen, you know, other than you have the order, right? You can kind of work backwards. Are they committed to a date? Is the
That's a
person,
good question. Yeah, that's a great question. I think yes. The answer is in my business, once you kind of get going, after you've been working with someone for a period of time, the questions turn to, when do you want to close this? Because it's a big deal to them too. It's not
yeah,
just something that they may or may not do. It's going to impact their career. And so when they're putting the time into you, then the questions turn into, when do you want to close it? And what is the likelihood that it's going to be my company? And usually what I see is, for the first little while, it's very it could be you, it could be your competitor, it could be this person over there, we don't know. And then once they kind of get past that vetting process, you'd think that they'd want to close, but then there's like, they kind of cut the competition out, and then it's, okay, we like you, we're convinced that it's you, but can we really do it with you? Now we've got to really put a whole nother thing in. And yeah, we put close plans together and have dates, and we'll say, okay, our date is November 16th, and coincidentally that's my birthday, let's make sure it's that day. And right, so we do all that we can to try to work backwards from that, and it helps tremendously, because if
yeah,
they're uncomfortable with that, you know
on the
that
surface. Yeah,
it's
you
not
want to
gonna,
know.
yeah, it's not a good sign. Yeah, it's not a good
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah, because I mean, the larger the deals, all of a sudden, all these people start popping up at the last minute. It's like, you know, who's cousin Harry and what's he thinking? You know, there's somebody on
Exactly.
the board wants you to look at something else.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, my heartbreaker last year, that's what happened. At the very final end, it was like, hey, this one thing kind of happened, and it actually, it didn't go away forever, it just delayed it. Because yeah,
Yeah,
John Doe comes in at the final hour and he's like, hey, I don't like this one little piece of your software. I mean, this happened last year where right at the end, I want to say we were going through legal documents and everything, going through everything, and someone surfaced and said, I don't know that this particular part of the software is going to work with my division. So next thing you know, I'm pulling engineers back in and they're doing demos, and yeah, because there's like 50 people involved. It gets a little crazy.
it gets, yeah. And I always tell people it's like the default is for either not happen, delay, or minimize. I don't know if that fits, where they buy as little as possible. I don't know if that's an option, or start
Can
over.
be. Start over is painful, isn't it?
You're like, well,
Oh
wait a second. You
gosh.
know, somebody else comes in, muddies the water, or there's, you know, somebody. Did you look at these guys? And you're like,
Yep,
and because people get scared.
they do. When you've got a purchase order that you're asking for that's $13 million, the amount of vetting that goes into that is not just, hey, John and Sue, they're convinced, let's do it. There's just so much pressure. And then, yeah, at the final end, it's like, hey, I think we're convinced, but we hired a new guy and he really loves this other company. We should at least take a look at him.
Right.
I mean, it's rough that way for sure. And so that's why I'm a um, the software that I sell is very technical. It does so many things that, frankly, I'll never be able to fully understand. I'm not an engineer, right? And I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with that. But that's why I think it's so important to just have a really, really solid relationship of trust, and let them know, like, my job isn't just to sell you something. Like, I'm going to help you find any information that you want.
Yeah.
And so if you have a doubt about a piece of our software, I'm likely not going to answer that. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to get a non-salesperson and they're going to come in and talk to you. And anyways, I think relationship is key. And if you can have a relationship of trust, you can get through those hurdles. But towards the end, when it's really crunch time and they're putting their career on the line to buy something that costs millions of dollars, they better trust you or it's just not happening. It just won't.
And how or what were kind of some of the stages you went through as a rep? Because going from staffing, which is a little bit transactional, very relationship, and you're kind of in the middle. You've got a
Oh
customer, and then you got a client,
yeah.
you got a candidate,
Right.
and you got to play
Right.
matchmaker, and
I
it's
love it.
always your fault, and it's like, right.
You sell staffing? Did you used to sell it? You've
Well,
just
I've
heard
got a
about
lot of friends who are
it.
headhunters, and I
Oh,
thought
nice.
about doing it a long, long time ago,
Yeah.
but but I've been the candidate and I've been the hiring manager, and so
So what's the transition? I'm
well,
sorry. Go ahead.
some of the stages that you went through, because now you're kind of ultra enterprise rep, multiple seven figures, right? Not many people can do that. That's not order taking.
I
Nothing
got you.
happens by accident. You don't get inbound for a $13 million deal, right?
Right, right. I understand what you're saying. So, what did the stages look like? Um,
Because like when I did it, I I had this stupid belief that when I get so good, I was going to call on the CEO, have a 1 hour meeting with him,
and just
walk him down
close
to
it up.
procurement. That's how naive I was. And then,
Never say it can't happen, right?
well, then I went back to being well, I was an engineer, and I spent my whole summer integrating all our hardware with their hardware. And then my CEO came in and did a $30 million deal. So I thought it was just that moment of his presentation that did it. But it was, that VP of that division looked at his engineers. Could we do it without this product? And they said no.
Yeah,
So it became, all the groundwork was done.
right. I hear what you're saying. And you're right. It takes a process to go from selling cell phones in an AT&T retail store, selling little old ladies text messaging. Like, hey, I mean, back in those days, text
It was
messaging was
expensive.
like you
Yeah.
were buying 500 for $5.
Yeah.
Kids are sending 500 before they even get out of bed, right?
Yeah.
Before they've even
It's not a
opened their eyes,
cost.
right? Right. So that was my sell back then. I remember my manager at the time. I was priding myself in being kind of a top producer at the time. And she's like, you're a follower. I'll never forget this. She was so powerful. She goes, you're a follower. I hired you because I thought you were going to like sell all of our features and all of our extra stuff. And I'm like, I can't believe you just called me a follower. Like, that is not me. I'm a leader. And she's like, well, you won't sell text messaging. You won't do this. You won't do that. So anyways, what are the stages? I think I had very good people in my path that helped guide me and lead me to be the best salesperson that I could be. Um, View it as not just a transaction, but a relationship forming experience that was going to help them do whatever it is that I was selling. And then it took effort on my part to commit to the bigger deals. And
Yeah.
most people don't want to do that. So for
Scary.
example, when I was in staffing for the first, I want to say it was for the first maybe year or so, maybe 2 years, I would literally sell anything to anyone. So it's like if they have a building and there's an employee in it, I would ask them, are you going to hire someone
Are
in the
you
next
lonely?
5 years? Yeah, I could hire someone in 5 years. I'm coming down. Like, I'm going to come down to your building. You're going to need me at some point.
Oh,
And so I did that for a while. And then I grew this pretty huge list of customers, but they were all small.
small.
I was like one guy here, two guys here, one guy here, or one person here. And over time I was like, man, this is really hard. Like, I don't know that I could be as successful as some of these other people if I don't commit to these bigger deals.
Yeah.
And so I had enough residual in the bank that I thought, okay, now I'm going to start committing to the larger companies. And so my company didn't tell me to do that. Frankly, they didn't want me to. But so I started to look at staffing instead of, okay, I'm not just going down to the ABC company that needs 2 people. I'm going to strategically look for this company that needs 100 every year, or they have an on-site recruiter that is there all the time that constantly has a revolving door. That would be a great account. It's going to take a long time to get in there, but if I get in there, it'll be great for me. So then the rest of my years in staffing, I kind of focused on being the large account guy. I mean, that's what it was called at
The
that.
elephant
That's kind of
hunter.
how we wrote. Yeah, it was like, hey, he's the big account guy. That's what he likes to do. And most of the time it paid off. And sometimes it was like, man, you got to get something to eat. Um, but I loved it. I enjoyed it. And it taught me to be more strategic, even in a transactional type environment. And so then when I took the leap from staffing to selling software that had millions of dollars, I could say to these managers and these directors and VPs that I interviewed with is, I was a large account guy. I know what it's like to be strategic. I'll take the time. If it takes 6 months or if it takes a year, I've done it. And I kind of keep this other stuff going on the side to keep everybody happy. But
Yeah.
my love is the big stuff. And so that's what made it good for me, because 90% of the people I worked with in staffing were amazing. This is not a shot at them, but they didn't want to take that
Risk.
risky road that I took. Yeah, because it's risky and it's hard. Yeah, it's way hard when you're looking at a company that's got, 300 temporaries on site. To get in there is so much more challenging than going down to the road, talking to Bob in the mechanic shop and saying, come on, Bob, when you need a machinist, I got you. And they're both fun and they're both rewarding.
Yeah.
But if you break a deal and then you get to say, hey, I'm going to put someone on site and that's going to pay me for the next 5 years, no brainer for me.
Right. But the bigger deal, the enterprise deal, isn't so much about the chit chat. It's about what are you doing for their career?
Exactly.
Finding the person who has the problem you solve, understanding what their personal win is, and aligning.
No doubt.
Yeah. And then working the way up the org with them. And, and trying to determine, who's got the juice and who doesn't.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a real tough one. I felt like I knew that so well in staffing. I felt like I knew who the decision maker was. I'm not afraid. I'm bold. And then when I fully made the leap into this enterprise stuff, there was still learning to do. So I mean, because I got in and I'm like, no, this is our guy, or this is our gal. Are they?
Well, that's it. Because
can they really close it?
I had a friend, he tried to explain the complex sale was just a set of simple sales. And I'm like, no, not really.
I don't think so.
I
don't think so either.
You've got to understand how a company buys and makes decisions, because typically the person you're dealing with hasn't done a deal like this before.
It's very possible. I mean, I can tell you 2 stories in particular that the manager, when we closed, basically once the curtain was completely open and it was like, you're in, like, I'm doing everything I can to close this deal. It was made very clear to me, this is going to help me get promoted or get me fired. And so now you're not selling it. Basically what it was you're not selling to me anymore. We're in this together. And it has to go well. It has to go well. You cannot screw this up. And it's like, I'm not, I'm your guy, right? But it was different than trying to sell and convince, because it's like, hey, I'm going to actually put this on my resume. This is going to be something that I'm going to say, I made a purchase. It was X amount of dollars. This is how it transformed our company. And if you screw this up, you're gone.
Yeah.
Basically.
And to now, you got to understand all of these different people, and you might not be the right guy to negotiate with legal. You might not be the right guy to talk to the board or the CFO, and giving different payment options and leasing options, and the time value of money and the ROI, and how are they going to justify this, and how is it going to pass the audit, and all of these things. Great salespeople. I made that early in my career. I started working with my CEO, and he was a Stanford MBA, and I would just drive him around at the end of the quarter, and I could I'd get in to meet the CEOs of all the customers. And he was like a JFK creature. You know, he could just get up there and he was charismatic and
Yeah.
stuff. But what I learned watching him present, it was never about the product. It was about the future of their company, not ours, theirs.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
And then all of a sudden, you know, I'd leave and the CEO would call me the next day, the customer, and say, when can Paul come back again? Right? Because
Oh
it
my
was,
gosh. So true.
you know, and it's like, well, let's get a deal and we'll do another one next quarter.
That's good. That's good. So the one point I want to make and just agree with you on is going from, you said you've asked a couple of questions, the stages, and then the thing you said about being the right person to do every step.
Yeah.
I feel so when I went from staffing, that was another major shift in staffing. I did it all. I sat down with Brian. Brian, what do you need? Here's your requirements. Here's the contract. You sign it. It costs $20,000. Here you go. We're done. I'm going to go back, find the person. I'm going to bring them in, and it's great. Now the environment that I'm in is I'm just a quarterback. I might not run the ball one freaking yard. And it was real challenging because I like to
run the ball.
I like to run, man. I'm used to
Give me the ball.
doing stuff. And it's like, you have a really good question. That's a good question for my, the director of professional services. That's a great question for my solutions consultant. That's a great question for whatever. And it's been challenging for me because I almost feel muffled at times because my job is just to quarterback the whole way
You're
through.
kind of the concierge of the deal.
Yes, that's a better way to say it.
The Sherpa kind of guiding it.
Yes.
You kind of got to know what to do, but you don't have to necessarily do it.
Right.
Because usually the best salespeople is either on the board, the investors, the CEO, the VP of engineering, the CIO, these people who are like experts at little niches. And they're great for a half-hour, 45 meeting. Just put them in, take them out.
Plug and play. You're in? All right, let's get you out of there.
Mission accomplished. Okay, put them in an Uber and head them back to the airport.
Okay, I gotta tell you a funny story about this. And this guy is so good. Okay, so this is not meant to be disrespectful, and I won't mention his name anyways, but he was so awesome, and he was so good with customers. But it was so funny because this was back in the day, and we were coming out of the time frame of like no contracts. So it was like, he probably sold in the time where it was like, yeah, just shake hands, man. Shake hands. You look at me in the eye. I look at you in the eye. We're walking out of here. I'll have somebody for you on Monday. And so that was the era that he grew up in. And so I have him on a meeting, and he flat out told this person, he was like, yeah, I don't need contracts. I don't need you to sign anything. He's like, let's just agree right now to what we're doing. And the guy loved it. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And so as we're walking out the door, I'm like, I'll be back later. We actually do have a contract because I can't place anyone out here without a services agreement. But anyways, to your point, like, yeah, you've got to be willing to pass the ball and recognize that it's not about you, especially in those enterprise sales. Because I wouldn't say complain, but last year I talked to my boss a couple times. I'm like, man, sometimes I'm wondering, like, what am I doing? And she, it's like, well, you've done a great job. And it's like, yeah, I have, I guess, because I've brought in all the right people. But I'm like, man, I want to feel like I'm in the boxing match, like I'm throwing punches too. And it's like, that's not your role.
It's not your
when
role. We
go through the contract, you bring in legal. You prep them, you give them all the information that they need, you make sure they're successful, then they got to do their job.
Yeah.
And so it's been hard for me to swallow, and I'm 5 years deep into that world. So I get what you're saying. It's hard. Yeah.
And how do you distinguish yourself against other salespeople, either competitors or salespeople
in terms of like skill. Personality or skill?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a hard one because I don't want to come across as seeming that I think because I get value from everybody. If
Right, but some people rely solely on their personality. Other people understand others' drivers. They're more strategic. They know what's going to
yeah.
happen. They anticipate the next step.
I think in terms of, comparing me to others or my skill level, I would say that it's pretty high. I mean, I think I have
But what's the distinction? Uh,
between skill and personality.
no. Between yourself and somebody who's not going to win that deal. I mean, because I'm sure you sit
Oh,
through pipeline
I gotcha.
reviews and
I gotcha.
QBRs.
I understand now. I understand. I think one of the biggest differentiators for me is that I am always willing to go the distance. Always. I will never stop. I will just keep going. So I'm also an Ironman. So I don't know if you know what an Ironman
I
is,
know
but
what an
it's a
Ironman is.
2.4 mile swim. Okay, so it's ridiculous. It's absolutely bonkers, but it's what I love to do, and I've been doing it for 10 years. So my personality fits really well with these long-term sales because it just lasts forever. You got to keep going.
How do you do that and sell at the same time? It's like, I try and get 5 to 6 miles in the morning, and I'm like,
it's super early in the morning. Now I've kind of laid off a little bit the last couple years, or actually, let's see, the last year and a half have been a little bit more challenging, but traditionally I would get up at like 4 in the morning
holy
and I'd be on the
smokes.
road. I'd get 2 hours. I'd get an hour and a half to 2 hour bike ride or a swim and a bike or something like that. And then I would go home, quickly rinse, drive down to
Repeat.
Salt Lake, and yeah, it's like, all right, now I'm here, like, get me some food, and I'm gonna work all day, and then I'd be home by 6:30. Now that I work from home, it's enabled that to be easier, actually, because if I get started at 8:30, I mean, I don't have to get up at 4 anymore. I
And how
just
many
don't.
races a year do you do?
So I've only done 2 full Ironmans, but I've done like 7 or 8 halves and then 40 Olympic distance. So like traditionally I like to do, when I was doing Ironmans, I did 1 a year. When I was doing halves, it was like 1 or 2. And then when I was doing the smaller triathlons, I was doing like 5 to 6 a summer. They were so much fun. So much fun. But you asked a serious question, like what's the differentiator? I think most of the time, partially, I'm too dumb to quit.
Well, the
So like
endurance and the stick with itness.
yes, you got to stick with it. And if a manager tells you, hey, I'm not interested now, it's like, to me, it's not as devastating. It's okay. It's not no, it's not right now.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's keep engaging. And what can I do to further this down the road? Right. So I'll try to take every angle that I possibly can to make sure that I don't leave anything on the table. And I think most people get exhausted, especially in enterprise sales. I mean, when you're looking at a year, year and a half, 2 years, it's like that thing ain't going anywhere. I mean, a couple of the deals I closed last year, they had been worked on by other people like years before. And it was like, oh, that company's really difficult or they're hard. And I'm like,
They'll never buy.
maybe. I'm like, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Right.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And I had a mentor whose saying was refuse to lose.
I love that.
And it was not just against competitors, but against doing nothing.
Yeah.
And
I think that's our worst comp, isn't it?
well, yeah. And it's just, I mean, the crazy crap that we did to close deals.
Oh yeah.
Like showing up with no appointment.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man, I could tell you so many of those. The drop-ins, the cold stops is what I called them.
And there was one New Year's Eve where I had it on speed dial, and he picked up at 7:30 at night, and he goes, "I see you've called here 37 times."
Oh my
and he goes, "That all?"
You're like, well, you didn't realize I was outside with binoculars as well. Like I knew you were wearing a blue shirt yesterday.
And that sounds amateurish in some ways. But if you're adding value and you believe it's important to do and that it makes sense for them, that's key.
Amen.
Cool. Hey,
Amen.
it's been a fun
Can't be
conference.
embarrassed.
Fun.
Yeah, it has.
Oh, where can people go to follow you?
So I've got, oh, that's a good question. I mean, LinkedIn, Jordan Sandberg is my name. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on all kinds of social media sites with Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to, yeah, I post a lot of stuff all the time. I need to pick it up a little bit on LinkedIn though.
Yeah, quit slouching. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure. You're a fantastic motivator. I love the stuff that you do. The funny stuff too rules. I hate to say it, man. The videos are great. Keep doing them. Thank you.